In this talk, we learn about the basics of evolution and become more comfortable with the terms of evolution, genotype, phenotype, and genetic variation. The term evolution implies change. Similarly, in the biological context, evolution is the changes that happen in populations over time. And these changes occur due to changes in the genetic composition or the genotype of the population. In order to understand what genotype is, we need to know what is the genetic material of living organisms. Deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA, is considered to be the genetic material that is present in all living organisms. This macromolecule is able to code for ribonucleic acid as well as proteins, and these macromolecules play essential roles in the normal development, functioning, and reproduction of different living organisms. The genetic composition of populations can change with time, thereby driving the evolution of organisms. This concept was proposed by two naturalists, Alfred Russel Wallace and Charles Darwin. They did many studies that allowed them to explain how new species are formed. Alfred Russel Wallace was a naturalist who traveled to different parts of the world and observed living organisms. He traveled on British naval vessels to places like South America, where he studied the different animals in Brazil and the Amazon River basin. He also traveled to the Malay archipelago, where current-day Malaysia and Indonesia is present, and observed the different organisms present there as well. Based on his observations, the Wallace line has been created, which is an imaginary line that delineates the Southeast Asian as well as Australian fauna. He observed striking differences in the animals on each side of the Wallace line, where on the eastern side of the line, where Australia is, he observed many marsupial mammals, while on the west side of the Wallace line, he observed many placental mammals. His observations enabled him to understand and propose how species are formed. Even today, his observations has helped us understand the role of geographic barriers on the evolution of organisms. Charles Darwin was able to propose the different concepts that come under the theory of evolution based on his observations that were done during his voyage on the HMS Beagle. Darwin was able to travel to many different continents and observe the life forms in all these different continents, thereby coming up with many different concepts to explain the diversity of life in different regions of Earth. To understand how evolution occurs, we need to know what is genotype and phenotype. We know that DNA is the genetic material that is present in all living organisms, and genes are present in the DNA of living organisms. The genetic composition of an organism is its genotype. The genotype of an organism determines the phenotype or the physical characteristics of the organism. For example, the genes present in corn allows the plant to determine the type of corn that it will produce, whether the kernels are yellow or white, or whether the kernels are going to be big or small. Changes in the genetic composition or genotype of the organism may result in changes in the phenotype of the organism. For example, we can have the genetic composition determine that a petunia plant will give rise to red-colored petunia flowers. However, a change in the genetic composition of the petunia plant can allow the plant to now start making white-colored flowers instead of red-colored ones. Similarly, genotypes of individuals in a population are usually not identical, and this gives rise to genetic variation in the population. This helps us explain how members of a family may look similar to one another and have similarities in their behavior and habits, but are not identical to one another. Changes in the genotype or genetic composition in different individuals in a population allows the population to evolve and adapt to different changes in the environment. Similarly, changes in genotype in populations can allow different organisms to evolve. For example, Homo sapiens evolved from species that were present previously, like Homo erectus, which in turn evolved from other types of species, like the Australopithecus afarensis. There is a lot of evidence that living organisms have evolved with time. For example, life began with prokaryotic organisms, which had a much more simpler internal composition than eukaryotic organisms, which evolved from prokaryotic organisms. Similarly, we first had unicellular organisms on Earth that then gave rise to multicellular organisms. Some ideas that have been put forth were that the unicellular protists, they came together to form a colony. And in this colony, there were many cells together. However, there was no true division of labor among the cells. As time evolved, the cells started undergoing changes to form a division of labor that is usually observed with multicellular organisms. This resulted in the formation of tissues, and eventually the organisms evolved to undergo sexual reproductive mechanisms. Thus, we are able to see how unicellular organisms can give rise to multicellular organisms with time. There are many different factors that can change the genotypes of individuals in a population and thus aid in evolution. One such factor are mutations. These are when there are changes in the DNA sequence, or they can have changes in chromosomal numbers of the cell. Another factor that drives evolution is the process of gene flow, where there is mixing of genetic information when one population migrates to a region where there is another population of similar species. Once they start mating with one another, we see that there is an increase in genetic variation that is able to drive the evolution of that population. Another factor that's able to affect the changes in the genotypes of a population is genetic drift. These are random changes that can happen in the genetic composition of populations with time. Another factor that's able to affect the genotypes of populations is natural selection. These are environmental changes, like the inclusion of predators in the environment that allows only certain organisms of the population to survive and reproduce as compared to others. And these surviving individuals are able to cause the population to undergo changes and evolve. Thus, with this, we come to the end of our talk, where we learned about what evolution was and how the concepts of evolution were defined by observations by Alfred Russel Wallace and Charles Darwin. We learned about genotype and phenotype and how the genotypes can affect phenotypes. We learned about genetic variation and how individuals in a population do not have identical genetic composition that gives rise to genetic variation in the population. We then learned about different factors that are able to drive the evolution of a population.